Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Ethnography for Research in Health Sciences. I hope you've all had a good week and a good weekend. I've been looking over papers today, waiting for a couple late papers, but that's okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about um, why we started the way we did. I think probably, and I would not be surprised, you were thinking to yourself while you're doing your assignment, well, how do I know what the ethical considerations are that the authors of a particular ethnography are taking into account as they begin telling us the story that they're telling us. Um, each ethnography ever written is different than the next one. So sometimes that information is very is offered early on, maybe in the foreword or an introduction of the ethnography, where they talk about the challenges they uh, prepared for or possibly encountered. Um, in other ethnographies, you may sort of get a feel for the way the author treats the subject matter. And in other ethnographies, you really don't get a strong message. You sort of have to sort of deduce, how they actually are telling the story, and possibly even if they had biases. In For those of you who are doctoral students, and I know most of you are, the idea of a ethical consideration, a subjectivity statement, a paragraph or two or three about the ethical considerations that are in place when you do a study. If you've had any research training at all, you will know that sometimes it's very easy, or it seems very easy, to say, uh, the participants signed informed consent that was approved by the IRB, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why I started here, having you pick up a book that you probably have hardly read yet, um, is to sort of instill this idea that whenever you're picking up a story, you're not going to know the whole story till you're done. But in research, when the story is the result of research, you kind of have to hunt and peck around, like um, many of you focused on different things, which is completely natural. But in storytelling, sometimes when you pick up a book for the first time, you might go to a bookstore. How many people hang out in bookstores anymore? But you kind of scan, and you sort of look at the beginning, the first couple pages, maybe pick up someplace in the middle, maybe see, how many pages it is, and how, if you could handle it, is it War and Peace, or is it a pictography, like the Lisa book is. And that's sort of the way we have to look at ethnographies. They're all different. And as a research output, um, we have to realize that it's research, but it's being presented in a way that makes it a story. This is not like any other research method. It's not even like other naturalistic research methods that you watched that short video on in the beginning of the semester, the first week. Um, and for that purpose, it really requires you to get inside of the book. So again, I said this in the first week, it would be very difficult for you to actually do an ethnography or even go out and get enough material from someone to tell a story in the depth and with the rigor that these ethnographies that I offered to you to read would. So we're sort of deconstructing it. So I hope what you got from this week was to think about all the ethical reasons why researchers who might choose this method, um, what is their decision making around ethical considerations, other than the stuff we all know, like you need an IRB protocol, you need a consent form, yes, those are more compliance issues. And those compliance issues are to ensure certain ethical considerations. However, when you deal with multiculturalism, when you deal with inequity in healthcare, when you deal with biases, one of the biases these days, of course, is where you sit on what's going on in the Middle East. Well, if you're going to tell a story in one period of time, you need to tell it in a way that's both placed historically, but can also outlive time because it's ethical. And you could read it in 2020, and you could read it in 20 and 24, and the message, the findings, which I always call in ethnography, the message is the same. And it's not biased by what's going on in the world at any particular time. So when you enter this course, you might have wondered, well, what's the difference between ethnography and every other type of method? What we're going to find is that ethnography really is a very different way of conducting research. And it's meant to draw the reader into a reality that they may or may not be familiar with. Sometimes we're very familiar with it, like the wool uh, uh, um, book After War. Many of us live in the Washington area, and we know what Walter Reed is. We know what type of patient goes to Walter Reed, et cetera. We're very familiar with that. We're probably less familiar with the Lisa context. I'm assuming most of us don't live there or haven't visited there, but we have a scant understanding, maybe even a biased understanding of what goes on in that context. And then in an interesting way, the way this all fell this semester, and then we all had the experience of living through the pandemic. So it's something very familiar, but it's focused so strongly on a particular aspect of of growth in the life of MDs that we all can't identify with it exactly. We all went through the pandemic, yes, but we can't all identify unless we were an MD in training during that time to understand how that context affects our lives. So the messages, let's call them the findings for now, of an ethnography is the story itself and how the story works as a vehicle to express research findings. Now, each book in its own way includes other types of materials other than just the act of storytelling, like pictures, or one is a graphic ethnography. Lisa, Life on the Line uses photographs and that sort of thing. It's likely that most everyone here, including myself, don't publish papers that have pictures in them, don't publish a research article that's an ethnography. But that doesn't mean that in work that you might be interested in the future, you could not do a major research study without by using this technique, to share your findings. So on that note, let's go to there we go. Let's go to where we're going in session 4. Sorry, wrong session. No, session 3, design and planning. So this week, what we're going to do is sort of imagine that you would be starting to set up a research design. Now, there's readings this week about design, and then you have what you've gathered from the ethical chapters that you read. And we're going to start to piece together. I mean, this is a multi-part assignment. We're going to start to piece together something that you would study in an ethnographic way. So if you look at the assignment here, after you've had a chance to read these chapters, they're really not very long. Um, uh, you can start to put together what you might want to study. For instance, you might be interested in, let's just say you might be interested in community health partnerships, and specifically in socioeconomically challenged environment. Could be a story as specific as, and ethnographies has been written about these things, a particular corner that is near a community health center, and getting the stories of the people that would go there for care because they have no other option. Um, it doesn't have to be controversial. It can be controversial. It, but as you can see, the stories that are usually told through ethnography are chosen, that method is chosen because it's so important to show the experience, to be sort of the mediator of the experience of the people or the phenomenon that is being studied. So be creative. I mean, you're not going to do this in this semester, but who knows? Maybe you have a dissertation topic in mind. Maybe you have a work situation where you would love to, I know we have a health professional here that's not a doctoral student. It might be something you really would like to sink your teeth into at your place of work that's a health center of whatever type. So, think creatively. So you want to set up the health context like any story. You want to give us a little bit of background, even if it's, well, strike that. I was going to say, even if it's fictitious, but I think it'd be better if you think of something, be easier for you. If you can think of something that um, uh, would actually be able to be done. And let me give you an example. Where I live, there is a person who is a major part of the community that I live in. He is a transition person with autism. So he's in his, I don't know, late 20s, maybe 30 at this point. And he's transitioned really well into a community that's truly embraced him. And he, in turn, has a very sort of dominant personality in the community. I've always said I would love to, I would love to write an ethnography about this person, but you see, the research would really be about how someone transitions from being, from the peds into adulthood and independence, and being able to live responsibly and so forth. So I've always thought, how exciting would it be to write a book about this, because not only is that health story need to be told, but it can only be told through this person's experience. And that's why I would choose an ethnography instead of just interviewing someone for the sake of, asking them about their, problem, their disorder, their disease, or whatever the case may be. So the assignment for this week is to begin to put together a research plan, a design that has a context, um, the what you're interested in, what type of participants, is it a system, is it a phenomena that goes on somewhere? You can be as creative as you'd like. Why ethnography? So just like any other method, we have to match the method with the research questions that we're asking. So why would ethnography be the best way to translate this research? And that's what I mean by um, the difference between just a run-of-the-mill, I'm going to ask people some questions about their health problem or their issue, or even professionals. I'm going to talk to emergency room nurses, you know. Why not a context that really requires readers to understand the lived experience of the individual or the people that are part of this particular phenomenon. There is a little reading having to do with recruitment. How might you recruit for this type of research? It's very different from just putting out a call for participants. If you were doing a survey or if you were doing even a mixed method study, again, that's stating this is what we want to know, this is what we want to understand, but at the same time, it's saying you will be part of two interviews, and it's much more structured. Why would it be challenging, or maybe it wouldn't be challenging, to recruit for this type of research project that you might do in the future? And then lastly, the ethical concerns that are specific to this context. So again, going back to the different ethnographies that you sort of perused, and talking about what the chapters had to say about ethics, what would be the ethics associated, possibly, if you could forecast them, the ethics that are associated with the problem that you're trying to understand? So, for instance, if you were doing a study of coworkers, health coworkers, in a very unique environment, like let's say it's palliative care or hospice or something like that, you'd really have to think about what are the ethical considerations specific to that environment, and what would you have to be careful of? I have a student who's very interested in places in the United States where self-euthanasia is legal, you know, and probably in the course of my student's life, will go out and do some research. You can imagine what it would be like to have the burden of translating what someone's parting thoughts are as they prepare to, end their own life. There are a lot of ethical landmines there that would have to be considered. So again, this is an opportunity to get started on an assignment that'll do much later. That's why it's called part one. It's assignment two, part one. There's an assignment two, part two. So what I also like you to do is post it both to the grade book and the discussion board for this week. So here's session 3. It wasn't there before. It's there now. Um, post it there, and then also to the grade book. And I'd like you each to take a look at someone else's. Let's go back to, oh, it's here. You should look at least one other student's design. Since you're probably all going to have a unique design, it really doesn't matter. And this class is small enough where we can give feedback to each other pretty, easily, because there's only 7 people in class. So anyway, that is moving now into the next week. And then looking ahead to session 4 is when I give you some time. This is the week after this. I give you some time to really start to lean into reading your ethnography. Ethnography is a high reading, high writing investment. So it's just one of those things. It would be like if you were doing a complex statistical study, you'd really have to get into the statistics. When you read ethnography, you need to imagine yourself reading a novel, which is really what you're doing. And that novel is communicating to you both research and a particular voice that cannot be understood in a different, using a different type of method. So I wish you all good luck with this week. I look forward to seeing your work. As always, if you have any questions, please go to the discussion board where it says Ask the Prof. If it's something more private, please email me directly, or we could set up an appointment at a convenient time for both of us. So I thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great week, and good luck on your assignment uh, that's due next Sunday. Thank you. Bye-bye.